It started with flashing lights and loud shouting. I was standing outside, totally frozen, as the woman who had just been screaming at me was now being handcuffed by the police. Her face was red with rage, but her voice was quieter now. I never thought my first week as a medical assistant would end like this. She kept yelling at the officers, saying they didn't know who she was. "I'm on the board. I'm on the HOA board," she shouted, as if that gave her the power to insult people, cause a scene, and then threaten someone in broad daylight. But here she was, being walked to a squad car in handcuffs. You know those people who think the world revolves around them? Who treat every small issue like it's a personal attack. That's exactly who she was. And what did I do to deserve all this? Nothing. Literally nothing. I was just trying to get through a normal day. I was on my way to visit a patient at their home. It was my third day on the job and I was still figuring things out. I parked where I was told to park. I wore my scrubs. I had my ID badge on. I followed every rule. But she didn't care. She walked up to me like she owned the street. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask who I was. Her first words were, "You're not supposed to be here." I thought maybe she was confused, so I smiled and said, "Oh, hi, I'm just here to see a patient. I'm with the home health care agency." Her face twisted. "That's not what I asked. This is a private neighborhood. You can't just park here and walk around like you belong." I tried to explain again, but she cut me off. "You people think you can just ignore the rules," she said. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about parking. It wasn't about me being new. It wasn't even about the HOA. This was personal for her. And I didn't even know her name. She started raising her voice. Loud enough that people came outside to see what was going on. She accused me of wasting her time, and said she was going to call the HOA president. Said she'd get me fired. She was completely losing it, and I was still standing there with my patient's medical kit in my hands, wondering what on earth was happening. I tried to walk away, but she followed me. She said I needed to leave right now or there would be consequences. A neighbor across the street started recording on their phone. Karen noticed. That's when she really snapped. She turned toward them and shouted, "You don't have the right to record me." Then she turned back to me and said something that made everything go quiet. "You better watch yourself. People like you don't last long around here." That's when someone called the police. I didn't ask them to. I didn't even know who did it. But a few minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up. The officers tried to talk to her calmly, but she just kept yelling. She said she was being harassed. That I was trespassing. That she feared for her safety. But the officers didn't buy it. They'd already talked to the neighbors. They'd seen the video. And then they asked her a simple question. "Did you make any threats?" She paused, looked around, and then said, "She was threatening me." The officer shook his head. "Ma'am, that's not what the witnesses said." And then, without warning, he told her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. Just a few days before all that chaos, I was feeling proud. I had finally landed a job I'd worked hard for, my first real position as a medical assistant. I was nervous, sure, but also excited. I had studied, trained, and passed all my tests. This was supposed to be a new chapter. A fresh start. My job wasn't at a hospital or a clinic. I was part of a home care team. That meant visiting patients in their homes. Mostly elderly people who needed regular checkups, medication management, or wound care. It was quiet work, personal and meaningful. I liked that part the most. That morning, I had been assigned to see a patient in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind with neatly trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, and signs that said, "Proud HOA Community." I didn't think anything of it. Just another house, another check-in. I had the patient's address, my GPS took me there, and I parked on the street like I always did. I grabbed my kit and walked up to the house, double-checked the address and rang the doorbell. The patient's daughter let me in and smiled. She was kind and told me her mother was resting in the back room. We chatted for a bit while I prepped everything. It felt normal, routine, comfortable. I was in there for about 30 minutes, just enough time to check vitals, go over her medication, and answer a few questions. When I stepped back outside, the sun was shining and the street was quiet. I had just opened my car door when I heard her voice. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" I turned and saw her, Karen. Arms crossed. Eyes narrowed. Walking toward me like she was about to write me a ticket or something. I thought maybe she was someone's mom or a neighbor. I gave her a polite smile and said, "I was just visiting a patient. I'm heading out now." She didn't smile back. She didn't even blink. "You can't park here," she snapped. "This is a private street. This isn't some free-for-all parking lot." Again I stayed calm. I told her I was with a licensed agency, that I was providing care to one of the residents. I even showed her my badge. But she didn't care. "You people always think the rules don't apply to you," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear. That line hit differently. "You people." I knew exactly what she meant. I tried to stay respectful. I didn't want to argue. I told her I was leaving anyway. But she wasn't done. She walked around my car like she was inspecting it, shaking her head, muttering to herself. Then she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the HOA president. You're going to regret this," she said. I didn't even know what to say. I'd never been spoken to like that before, not while just doing my job. It wasn't like I was blasting music or blocking someone's driveway. I was a medical worker visiting a sick patient. I got in my car, but she stood behind it on purpose so I couldn't back out. Just stood there staring at me. Her phone still in her hand. I rolled down my window and asked, "Ma'am, can you please let me leave?" That's when she exploded. "You think you can just come into our neighborhood and walk around like you own the place?" she screamed. "You're not even supposed to be here. You wasted my time and you're lucky I don't call the cops." I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter. My heart was pounding. I wasn't scared yet, just confused. Why was this happening? Neighbors were starting to look out their windows. One man across the street stepped outside with his phone raised. I saw him start to record. That's when everything started spiraling. Karen didn't like being recorded. Not one bit. The second she noticed the man across the street holding his phone, her whole body language changed. She stopped yelling at me and turned her attention to him. "Are you filming me? You can't do that. That's illegal," she shouted, even though it clearly wasn't. The man didn't say anything back. He just kept recording. Calm. Silent. Watching. Karen's face twisted in frustration. She looked back at me like it was somehow my fault. Like I had set her up. "This is harassment," she yelled. "You people think you can come here 'cause drama and then make me the bad guy?" I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say anymore. Nothing I said seemed to make any difference. She wasn't looking for answers. She was looking for someone to blame. She stormed up to my car again. "You don't belong here. I'm serious. You think this is over?" At this point, I was just trying to stay calm. I kept both hands on the steering wheel and stared ahead. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. She kept pacing back and forth behind my car, blocking me in. Then she said something that made the air around me feel heavy. "You're lucky I don't get my husband's gun." I froze. Did I hear that right? Did she just say that out loud? The neighbor across the street definitely heard it. He looked up from his phone and shouted, "Ma'am, you just threatened them on camera." Karen spun around. "I did not. I was just saying he's a veteran. We don't take kindly to strangers sneaking around." But the damage was done. That was no longer just a rude lady yelling at someone she didn't like. That was a threat. A real one. The neighbor put his phone down and pulled his own out of his pocket again, this time to make a call. I didn't know who he was calling, but I had a pretty good guess. Karen suddenly went quiet. She realized she had said too much. Too loud. In front of too many people. She turned back to me and hissed, "You better not tell anyone about this. I know your type. Always playing the victim." Then she walked off like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just threatened someone doing their job in broad daylight, in front of half the neighborhood. I was still sitting in my car, unsure whether I should drive off or wait. My hands were shaking. I had been trained in patient care, infection control, even CPR. But nothing in my training covered what to do when someone blocks your car and threatens violence over a parking spot. About 5 minutes later, I saw flashing lights at the end of the street. 2 police cruisers pulled up, slow and steady. Officers stepped out and started talking to the neighbors. Karen came out of her garage like she had nothing to hide. She waved at the officers like they were friends. "Oh good, you're here," she said loudly. "I was just about to call. We've had some suspicious activity in the area." One of the officers nodded and said, "We got a call about threats made on this street. Do you know anything about that?" Karen smiled and pointed at me. "Yes, I do. That girl right there. She's not even supposed to be here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she'd said and done, she was still trying to flip the story. Still trying to make herself look like the victim. But the officers weren't buying it. One of the officers walked over to me while the other stayed near Karen. He approached calmly with a soft voice, asking for my name and what had happened. I handed him my ID badge and explained everything. I told him I was a medical assistant doing a routine home visit. I told him how Karen had approached me, blocked my car, and shouted at me. Then I mentioned what she said about the gun. That made him pause. His face changed slightly, still professional but now more alert. "Did anyone else hear the threat?" he asked. I pointed across the street to the man who had been recording. He filmed everything, I said. She said it loud enough for all of us to hear. The officer nodded and walked over to speak with the neighbor. At the same time, Karen was still going off. I could hear her voice rising again, trying to talk over the other officer who was asking her questions. She was loitering. She parked in front of my house. I didn't know who she was. She didn't even have a visitor's pass. The officer tried to interrupt, but Karen wouldn't stop. She was so sure of herself, so confident that she was right, that she didn't notice the second officer coming back from the neighbor's house. He had the phone in his hand. And he'd seen the video. He asked Karen one question. "Ma'am, did you say anything about a weapon?" Karen crossed her arms. "I said my husband's a veteran. That's not a crime." The officer nodded. "But did you say anything about using a gun or getting one?" Her eyes narrowed. "You're twisting my words. I didn't threaten anyone." The two officers glanced at each other. One of them took a step forward. "We've reviewed the recording. And based on what we saw and what we've heard from multiple witnesses, we need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Karen froze. She looked confused at first, like she didn't hear him right. "What?" "You're being detained for making a criminal threat," the officer repeated. "Put your hands behind your back." It was like watching a switch flip. Karen went from smug to shocked in a second. "Wait, what are you talking about? I'm on the HOA board. I know people. I was trying to protect my community." But it didn't matter. The officer gently but firmly took her by the arm and turned her around. She started yelling again. "You're making a mistake. She's lying. That video is fake." The neighbors just stood there, silent, watching. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. One of them, a woman standing near her front porch, shook her head and muttered, "About time." I couldn't move. I just sat there in my car watching her get cuffed right there in the street, still shouting about HOA rules and neighborhood safety. When the officers walked her toward the patrol car, she locked eyes with me. For a second I thought she might say something. Maybe even apologize. But she didn't. She looked angry. Furious. Like this was all my fault for not letting her control the situation. The officer who had spoken to me came back. "You're good to go," he said kindly. "We've got all the information we need. Thanks for staying calm." I nodded, still in disbelief. "Is she really being arrested?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You don't get to threaten people, especially not in front of cameras and witnesses." He thanked the neighbor for the footage. Karen's voice faded as the car door shut behind her. After the patrol car pulled away, the street finally went quiet. I just sat there for a while, engine still running, trying to process everything that had just happened. It felt surreal. One moment I was doing a routine checkup, and the next I was involved in a scene that looked like something from a reality show. I thought about calling my supervisor but didn't know where to start. What was I even going to say? "Hi, I was just verbally attacked and threatened by a neighborhood Karen, and then she got arrested." It sounded unbelievable even to me. Before I could decide, the woman who had let me into the house earlier, the patient's daughter, walked out to my car. She looked shaken but calm. "I saw everything from the window," she said softly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." I nodded. "Thank you. I didn't expect any of this." She sighed and looked toward the street. "Honestly, we've all had problems with her. She thinks she runs this neighborhood. We've filed complaints before, but nothing ever came of it. Until now." Hearing that gave me some small sense of comfort. It wasn't just me. She had a history of this behavior, and I had simply been her latest target. Another neighbor, an older man with a kind face, walked over too. He was the one who had recorded the video. "You handled that better than most," he said. "I've lived here 15 years and I've never seen her get what she deserved. But today? That was long overdue." I thanked him probably more than once. If he hadn't recorded that video, I honestly don't know what would have happened. Karen might have convinced the police that I was the one causing trouble. She was so sure of herself, so aggressive, it was easy to imagine how things could have gone wrong. He waved off the thanks. "I just hit record. You stayed calm. That made all the difference." I finally decided to call my supervisor. I kept the explanation simple, just enough to let them know what happened and that the situation had been handled by law enforcement. She sounded shocked at first, then concerned, then supportive. "We'll file an incident report just to be safe. But you didn't do anything wrong, so don't worry. You were in the right place doing your job." That was good to hear. I didn't want this to turn into some big issue with work. The last thing I needed was for my brand new job to be put at risk over something so ridiculous. Before I left, a few more neighbors came outside and waved to me. A couple of them even came up to say thank you, for being calm, for not yelling back, for not making it worse. But the truth is, I didn't stay calm because I'm some kind of hero. I stayed calm because I was scared. I didn't know how far Karen was willing to take things. Seeing her in handcuffs had shocked me, but it also brought a weird kind of relief. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it showed that, finally, someone like her couldn't just walk all over people and get away with it. As I drove away from that neighborhood, I looked in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I wondered if I'd ever have to go back there again. I hope not. But at least I knew one thing for sure. Next time someone tells me they had a Karen moment, I'll believe them without a single doubt. The next day my phone didn't stop buzzing. Friends, coworkers, and even a few people I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out. Somehow, the video had made its way online. It had started as a simple clip shared in a neighborhood group chat, then someone uploaded it to a local community forum. From there it spread like wildfire. People were tagging me in comments, even though I hadn't posted anything myself. My face wasn't even in the video, just my voice and my badge when I tried to explain why I was parked there. But it didn't matter. The internet did its thing. Some of the comments were supportive. Can't believe she treated a healthcare worker like that. That poor girl handled it like a pro. Others were more blunt. Classic HOA Karen behavior. That woman needs therapy, not an HOA badge. It was strange seeing people talk about me like that. Most of them didn't even know my name. But they were angry for me, and that made me feel seen. For once, the internet wasn't rushing to defend the loudest voice in the room. They were standing behind the quiet one. By lunchtime, local news outlets had picked up the story. HOA board member arrested after threatening medical assistant. It was right there in black and white, with screenshots of the video and blurry images of Karen in handcuffs. I'll admit, I stared at that headline for a long time. It didn't feel real. At work, I had to explain everything all over again. Some of the senior nurses were shocked. One even gave me a big hug and whispered, "You did the right thing." My supervisor asked if I wanted time off, but I said no. I needed the normal routine to keep my mind from spinning. When I went on my next house visit, I was more cautious. I parked a little farther from the homes. I checked around me before getting out of the car. I wasn't paranoid, I just didn't want to go through anything like that again. But something had changed. People looked at me differently now. Neighbors smiled. A few even waved. One woman brought me a bottle of water and said, "Thank you for what you do. We appreciate you." It was such a small thing, but it meant a lot. Later that week, I got an email from someone on the HOA board from that same neighborhood. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. But it stood out. They wrote, "On behalf of the board, we apologize for what you went through. Her behavior was unacceptable and does not represent our values. We're taking steps to make sure nothing like that happens again." I didn't expect an apology, especially not from them. That made it even more powerful. I never responded, but I saved the email. Not out of spite or pride. Just as a reminder that even when people try to tear you down, there are still others who will lift you up. I learned a lot from that whole mess. About staying calm. About documenting everything. And about how quickly people's true colors show when they think they hold power over you. What stayed with me most wasn't just the yelling or the threat. It was how a simple act, recording, listening, standing firm, could change the outcome of an entire situation. I kept doing my job after that. I kept visiting homes, checking vitals, and offering care to people who needed it. But I also kept my phone fully charged and my badge visible. Just in case. A few weeks later, I was back to my usual routine. Early mornings, packed schedule, and a rotating list of patients spread across the city. The Karen incident was still fresh in my mind, but life doesn't stop just because something crazy happens. I didn't have the luxury to dwell on it. I had work to do. But I won't lie, something in me had changed. I was more alert. More aware of my surroundings. Every time I pulled into a new neighborhood, I scanned the street. Looked for signs. Watched who was outside. Not out of fear exactly, but more like instinct. I had learned the hard way that not everyone sees a medical assistant as someone there to help. It was on a Thursday morning when I drove into another quiet neighborhood, not too different from the one where everything had gone down. Nice houses, tidy lawns, and yes, another sign that read HOA Enforced Community. My stomach tensed a little, but I reminded myself it was just another visit. Just another house. I parked on the curb again, double-checked the address, and walked up to the front door. The patient's daughter opened it before I could even knock. She smiled and said, "You're the one from that video, right?" I froze for a second, surprised. I hadn't said anything about it to her or anyone else on my schedule. She noticed my hesitation and added, "Don't worry, it's a good thing. We were actually hoping you'd be the one assigned." That was new. As I stepped inside, she explained that her mom had been following the story. She said anyone who can stay calm under pressure like that must be a really good nurse. Technically, I'm not a nurse, but I didn't correct her. Felt good to hear. It reminded me that some people were paying attention to the right things. After the checkup, she walked me out and thanked me again. Then, as I was unlocking my car, I heard someone behind me call out, "You the one from that Karen video?" I turned slowly. A man, probably in his late 40s, was standing by his truck across the street. He didn't look angry, just curious. "Yeah, that was me," I said cautiously. He nodded. She got what was coming. That kind of behavior gives the rest of us a bad name. That made me smile just a little. Not everyone tied to an HOA acts like Karen. Some of them really do just want to keep the neighborhood looking nice, keep things fair. I had to remember that. Still, I couldn't help but feel like I had a spotlight on me now. Every move I made, every house I visited, it felt like someone was watching. Not in a threatening way, more like they were waiting to see if I'd stay calm again. If I'd keep doing my job with the same patience. And I did. But now I was more confident. I carried myself differently. I wasn't just someone quietly doing paperwork in the background anymore. People knew who I was, even if just for a moment, and that gave me a voice I didn't have before. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't want to be the girl from the video. But now that I had that label, I was going to use it right. Not for fame, not for likes, but to remind people that showing respect, even in the face of anger, matters more than anyone realizes. And as I pulled out of that neighborhood, I saw something that made me laugh. A bumper sticker on a neighbor's car. "Be kind. Don't be a Karen." It was simple. But it said everything. About a month after the incident, I got a letter in the mail. It was hand-addressed, no return address, and the handwriting looked rushed. At first, I thought it might be some spam or a random piece of junk mail. But when I opened it and started reading, I had to sit down. It was from Karen. The same woman who yelled at me, threatened me, blocked my car, and ended up in handcuffs. The letter wasn't long. It was 2 pages written in blue ink, and it started with 4 simple words, "I owe you an apology." I stared at those words, not sure what to feel. The same person who had made me feel so small in front of a crowd, who had screamed like I was some kind of criminal, was now writing in shaky cursive, trying to sound human. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. She said she had been going through a lot. Her husband's declining health, issues with the HOA, stress building up at home. She said it wasn't an excuse, just an explanation. She admitted she let her anger take over, and she regretted how she treated me. Then she wrote something that caught me completely off guard. I watched the video. I didn't recognize myself in it. I looked like a monster. And I think that's what finally broke through to me. I read that line twice. Maybe 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wasn't expecting that kind of honesty. It didn't make what she did okay. But for the first time, it sounded like she understood what she had done. She also mentioned that after the incident, she was asked to step down from her position on the HOA board. The neighborhood had decided to review their policies and retrain the board on how to handle interactions with residents and guests. Apparently, my case wasn't the only one. She said she planned to attend a local anger management program and had already started seeing a therapist. Not because anyone forced her, but because, in her words, "I don't want to be remembered for that video. I want to be better than that." I sat there holding that letter, not sure what to feel. Part of me was still angry. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away. But another part of me, a bigger part, just felt tired. Tired of holding on to what she'd done. Tired of carrying the weight of that day. I didn't write her back. I didn't need to. Some things don't need a reply to be heard. But I kept the letter. Not because I wanted to remember the incident, but because I wanted to remember that even people who mess up, even people who lash out, can sometimes see themselves clearly, if they're willing to look. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about how that one moment had spiraled into so many unexpected turns. The video, the arrest, the reactions, the letter. And through it all, I realized something important. Being in healthcare teaches you to look beyond the surface. Behind every behavior, there's usually a reason. Behind every angry face, there's usually a story. Sometimes you'll never hear it. Sometimes it'll come too late. But when it does come and it's honest, it sticks with you. So I kept doing my job. Visiting patients. Listening. Helping. Not because of what happened, but despite it. Because that's what we're trained to do. Because that's what I chose to do. And no matter how loud someone yells, no matter how public things get, I'll always believe that calm, quiet care has more power than people think.